Check 1, 2. Check, check. Microphone test, 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and welcome to Community and Protective Services Committee. This is Agenda 28 today for Thursday, the 17th of October, 2013. For those of us joining today who are going to be speakers or have signed up to be speakers, and I think we only have one at this point, would remind you when you come forward to speak, please make sure you use the microphone at the table, because the committee is audio cast, so we want to make sure that folks on the internet can hear your deputation. So with that, I will call the committee to order. And members of committee, are there any declarations of interest? No? Seeing none, thank you. Confirmation of minutes, minutes 27 September 19th, 2013. Is that carried? Carried. Thank you. We'll go through a brief consent agenda. We have two presentations today from Emergency and Protective Services. Apart from that, we have no presentations planned, but staff are available to answer questions if necessary. Item number 1, commemorative naming Kenneth J. Watkins Pathway in Stittsville. The report has been circulated, and this has gone through the proper commemorative naming procedure. There were no objections obtained during the comment period. And Councillor Caudry is in support of this. It's in his ward. May we carry this? Carried. Thank you very much. Status update, Community and Protective Services Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending 10 October 2013. All of these three, I think there's 3 of them, and they're on track to be responded to. May we receive this report? Received. Thank you. City Operations, Community and Social Services Department Community Funding Framework Update. This is an administrative report from Community and Social Services on the community funding parcel that they're required to bring back. It was circulated with the agenda in advance. Would anybody like to hold this, or may we carry it? Hold for a question. We'll hold that for Councillor Fleury for a question. Item number 4, collaboration and efficiency opportunities within emergency services. The final report. This is the report between Ottawa Police Service, the Fire Service, the Paramedic Service, to discuss how they can more efficiently integrate with each other and operate. Is there any desire to hold this, or may we receive it? Receive. Sure.
I've seen in the report there's quite a bit of work has been done to this item, Mr. Chair, and all departments, it seems, working together, which is great news to the city. But when you talk about the protocol for call for service, when would we see a report how we achieve that collaboration? Like perhaps when you say we had 100 call attended by so many, and then just when we see the actual number. Like I know here we say we're working together with all the chiefs and all departmental, but I like to see numbers.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor El Shantiri. Part of our work over the next year is to begin to measure the performance and look at those numbers. It is our intent to come back in early 2015 and show you the difference. We're also reporting numbers in terms of calls we're responding to each of the annual reports for fire and paramedics, as well police. And I think we've mentioned in the report we can already see there's been a reduction in calls that, for example, our fire service is going to. So we'll give you a more comprehensive report with analysis on the call data.
Because the reports speak on length about new way of doing business, which is great news for the taxpayer, but it doesn't identify, when you talk about the radio system, it doesn't identify how much reduction or increase. We know it's reduction in cost, but it doesn't identify the number. We like to see the numbers so the committee can see your work with other group had achieved saving. I like to see those numbers.
Oh, absolutely, and I know we will be doing some work through the station location study report we're doing with fire services that as a result of, for example, tiered response, we may be able to make some changes in that regard as well. So that will all be coming forward.
And also there is a change to the radio system, if I've seen in your report, right?
That's correct. Yeah, so by 2015, the radios we're currently using can no longer be replaced, so we're going to a new radio system.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the staff for a good report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So is this item received?
Received.
Thank you. We're going to hold items number 5 and 6. There's presentations from those, and I believe we have a speaker on item number 6. That leaves us item number 7, Community Partnership Major Capital Program Summary of Funding Allocations, again published online last week and circulated with the report. May we recommend Council approve this listing?
Carried.
Thank you. Item number 8, Community Partnerships Minor Capital. Minor Capital Program Summary, Funding Allocations, the same scenario as the major. May we recommend Council receive this listing of projects funded through the program? Received. Thank you. There are 2 IPDs to receive, information previously distributed, a vehicle growth summary for 2014, and a pilot program extension of standing offer to not-for-profit organizations, which I'm quite proud of because that was my idea. Received? Thank you very much. All right, enough patting myself on the back. Back to item number 3. Councillor Fleury, you had a question on community funding framework update.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was mainly in link to the past report. I think it was at our last committee meeting where we saw the homelessness plan, and I'm unclear how both these components fit together, although in my view they should, or if not, I'd like to better understand them.
No, in terms of how the components fit together within community funding versus the investments we place in homelessness and housing, the homelessness housing money largely comes from the federal and or provincial coffers. It's about 70% of those dollars are housing related, 30% are the top up. In community funding, it's essentially 100% municipal dollars, and these are the areas where we choose to invest in specific community development type projects. So it's in addition or on to the side of housing, more targeted to programs that are community level, community resource centers, going into the community houses that are very much around programming rather than housing infrastructure.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Burry and Councillor Fleury. So with that, is this item carried? Carried. Thank you very much. That leaves us item number, I think we're at 5, I'm sorry. Bylaw Regulatory Services 2012 Annual Report. So Chief Anderson's with us today, as well as Christine Hartig from her shop. And Chief, we'll turn it over to you. I know you have a presentation on bylaws first ever, what is going to be annual report. So proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning. We are pleased and honored to be able to present to you our first ever annual report for our branch. The Bylaw and Regulatory Services branch is committed to achieving compliance with municipal standards and to providing other services that contribute positively to the quality of life in our city. The branches, I'm sorry, I have jumped ahead. Sorry, I have to give you background first. Our branch is part of the city's Emergency and Protective Services Department, and it consists of 4 divisions: Enforcement East and West, our Licensing Permits and Markets Group, and Parking Enforcement. Our branch also manages and operates the Bywood and Parkdale markets and our spay-neuter clinic. The policy and administration staff supports all 4 divisions with reports and bylaw development and interpretation services, as well as logistics and dispatch services. Together, these divisions assist the city in serving over 935,000 residents, thousands of businesses, and almost 10 million tourists annually. The branch is committed to achieving compliance with municipal standards and to providing other services that contribute positively to the quality of life in our city. The branch staff's vision is to be respected and valued leaders in municipal compliance and service excellence, making a difference for a healthy, safe, and vibrant Ottawa. And our service promise is committed to serving our community. Our branch manages the administration or enforcement, or both, of over 50 municipal bylaws and a number of provincial acts. To give you an example of some of the issues that we're involved with, we enforce the traffic and parking bylaw, noise bylaw, property standards and property maintenance, the smoke-free regulations in the City of Ottawa, issues surrounding fences, and business and lottery licensing. The bylaw and regulatory service staff also coordinate and administer various city programs and services that include the City of Ottawa Spay-Neuter Clinic and the Byward and Parkdale markets. As a perceived center of expertise on regulatory matters, the branch works collaboratively with many city departments and external service providers. For example, our parking unit supports transit services in keeping the bus routes clear, and our Public Works Department in its snow removal and snow clearing operations. In 2012, the branch also worked with the Ottawa Public Health in the development and implementation of the city's new smoke-free strategy, including the introduction of provisions in several bylaws to support smoke-free public places, including all of our city parks. And we continue to foster our relationship with the Ottawa Police Services in enforcing our bylaws that are relevant to neighborhood safety. The bylaw and regulatory services branch also works very collaboratively with city business improvement areas in issues related to enforcement, parking, and many special events across the city. The branch markets unit works in partnership with Farmers Market Ontario, Savour Ottawa, market stakeholders including the Byward Market Standholders Association, the residents, businesses, and the Byward, Rideau, and Wellington West Business Improvement Area. In May of 2012, the branch developed a partnership with the Town and Gown Committee, which represents 21 universities and 35 communities across the province. And our branch assisted in the formation of Ottawa's first Town and Gown Committee at Ottawa University. In 2012, the bylaw branch worked with its public health partners in the establishment of the expanded smoke-free space regulations that saw all city properties become smoke-free. The taxi bylaw was reenacted to include a number of amendments to improve service to the general public, tourists, and our disabled communities. In May, our branch put forward a report that amended the current noise bylaw to include tenants and resident property owners in the mitigation of noise disturbances occurring on their properties. These amendments were approved by Council and have shown to be very effective, actually, in the last year. Council also approved proposals with respect to the new street food vending program that established up to 20 new food vendors on the city streets, a very front and center program. We are pleased to report that of the 20 spaces, 17 are currently operational. Bylaw and regulatory services responded to almost 79,000 requests for service in 2012, which is an increase of 3.6% from the previous year. Our requests for service in 2012 were highest in parking, animal control, and noise, which is a consistent pattern over the years. A review of the statistics from 2001 to 2012 indicate that the areas that have experienced the most significant growth in requests for service are parking control, which increased 45% over that time period, property standards, which increased from 2,800 calls to 9,000, representing over 200%, and zoning, which increased from 83 calls in 2001 to 1,982 in 2012. Trends with respect to noise and animal care and control are depicted in these graphs. Since 2001, the number of requests for service to which the branch has responded has increased from 56,000 to the current day almost 79,000, which is a 46.7% increase in 11 years. In addition, the markets management team at Byward fielded close to 28,000 inquiries in 2012, which is up 18% from 2011, which goes some way to showing how vibrant the market area is. During 2012, the licensing unit issued over 18,000 business licenses and processed over 525 lottery licenses. The unit also conducted 2,200 taxi inspections and 130 limousine inspections, and inspected 200 food trucks and carts. Over 370,000 parking infraction notices were issued in 2012, which resulted in $19 million in revenue. Bylaw and Regulatory Services continue to maintain a strong working partnership with the city's Provincial Offences Court, including our coordination with the implementation of the private parking enforcement agencies' cost-sharing agreements, which explains the increase in the number of parking tickets that were issued. So by early 2012, we had agreements in place with many private agencies for the issuance of city parking tickets. During 2012, our branch implemented a number of service changes internally, which supports the city's Service Excellence initiative of achieving a positive experience for our clients, the residents. The majority of the business licensing services were decentralized from Ben Franklin Place and are now delivered at all 7 client service centers across the city of Ottawa. This resulted in improved services to the residents and the businesses with more convenient locations and expanded service hours. It also represented operational efficiencies for the City of Ottawa. As part of that counter consolidation, the service counter at 735 Industrial was reopened for the license categories that our branch continued to provide service for. So such things as taxis, limousines still are managed through our branch. And we all staff in our branch moved to the central location of 735 Industrial. The activities of the city's longstanding spay-neuter clinic are coordinated by a licensed veterinarian using the highest industry standards and best practices. The Cost Recovery Clinic offers an accessible and affordable service to the residents of Ottawa. In support of the city's Service Excellence goal to improve client experiences, this clinic amended its post-operative pet pickup hours in 2012 and extended the hours in order to allow pet owners to pick their animals up at the end of the day rather than midday after surgery. The clinic was also able, by extending its hours, to eliminate a 6-month waiting list for animals. In support of the branch's goal to create an engaged workforce, we also launched 2 staff committees, the Service Excellence Committee and the Diversity Committee. The Service Excellence Committee mandate is to provide staff an opportunity to bring forward their ideas on ways to improve areas of concern identified by the results of the 2011 staff survey. Through its various subcommittees and working groups, the Service Excellence Committee helped to establish a new deployment schedule to better respond to service requests. The Diversity Committee mandate is to provide a welcoming, diverse, and respectful workplace in all the work that Bylaw and Regulatory Services performs, and to improve diversity through recruitment and retention strategies so that our workforce is reflective of the population that we serve. Committee members have established an outreach and community engagement initiative focused on increasing the branch's profile at various job fairs across the city and local educational institutions, promoting Bylaw and Regulatory Services as a potential career path. The staff of our branch also raised $3,000, a very small branch, by the way, raised $3,000 towards the city's United Way fundraising initiative. We also raised money for the Christie Lake program and prostate cancer research through the Movember campaign. In 2012, one of our parking control officers, Mo Duella, was presented with a Community Safety Award for saving the life of a toddler he found wandering the streets in winter. Also intervened when a man was being beaten by a steel bar and by stopping a woman from committing suicide. Mo, by the way, works exclusively night shift in the city of Ottawa and tends to work in the more urban area. And so he's very diligent about keeping his eyes open to activities that are going on. In May of 2012, Christine Hartig was recognized by the Community and Protective Services Committee for her 25 years of dedicated service to the management of the city's Royal Swan program. Thank you, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Chief, and thank you for taking the time to put together this presentation. I'm glad you did. It's, I think, important for folks to realize that bylaw has a lot more to do with folks' quality of life in the city than perhaps they realize. Most people tend to think of bylaw officers as being parking control, but there's so much more that you're involved in doing that, translates down to, making life in the city better. So I think it's very worthwhile that you took the time to kind of showcase a little bit of the breadth of what you do. I know folks in the uniform profession aren't really used to taking victory laps, but I think you do a tremendous amount of work and have a wonderful team, and for a very small team, deliver a lot. So congratulations on not just the report, but of course, thank you for all of the work that you do. I had only just one question of clarification with relating to the parking offenses or calls for service issued. And I know that when we move to the process where private property owners would, after they participated in our program, start issuing city tickets, and we see that upswing in your graph, I just want to be clear that our understanding is that that's really not quote-unquote new tickets. That's simply tickets that would have previously been private issue tickets, and by simply taking it out of that realm and moving it into the city process, the net number of tickets being given out in the city hasn't really swollen that much. It's just a matter that now the folks who are getting them have consistency of their voluntary tax, as it were, and they have the repercussions or the response mechanisms. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Councillor Tierney?
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a great report, and I do appreciate it. I guess I have two very simple questions, and one maybe we won't be able to answer, but Ottawa seems to have a very high number of bylaw infractions being issued compared to other cities. Is there a reason for that? Is it based on the volume of calls we get through 311, and why do you think that is?
Are you referring just to parking infractions or other charges?
No, I'm talking about other charges overall.
In terms of parking enforcement, our numbers have trended pretty consistently over the years. We have a very concentrated downtown core, and we have a large suburban population who tends to travel into the downtown core on a daily basis. So the majority of the tickets that are issued on street are downtown core tickets because parking is so rare and difficult to find in the downtown core. And those numbers have been fairly steady. In terms of issuing what we call Part 1s or PONs or charges for other bylaw infractions, we're actually not on the higher end. Our mandate is to, whenever possible, to educate and bring about voluntary compliance. Only in situations where it's absolutely necessary do we issue charges for things like noise or fences or those other kinds of infractions.
Great, thank you. And the other one, I was curious about, and I was just kind of, I honestly don't even know, do we issue a lot of littering tickets?
We don't know. It's very difficult to be able to identify the person who's actually littered, which makes it more difficult. But certainly, if we have sufficient evidence and it's an ongoing issue, we will investigate and take whatever measures we can to end it.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I completely understand you have to catch people in the act. It's more of a awareness campaign, education campaign. That's probably a completely different area to speak to that. I'm just raising it because a constituent I walked around with last week for an hour identified a lot of litter in a certain area, and I thought it would be best to ask that question. But thank you very much for the report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fleury, then...
Since we're talking about the numbers, Councillor Holmes and I, when we look at the chart, I think in the three biggest categories, we have most, I don't know if it's infractions the right word, but property standards, noise, graffiti, we have most reports. I have to start by saying thank you. I mean, over a year now, we did some changes to the noise bylaw. We've seen wonderful success. Recently, the vacant buildings, I think that is, there's a lot there to be desired, and we're going to see some positive outcomes there. So I want to thank Christine, yourself, and the department. Valerie, who worked with you in making sure that these changes were meaningful and also impactful in the community. I'm wondering if you could give us, I know that based on density, we're hitting the most numbers, but on a high level, can you speak to us about how you see the changes to the numbers, especially in those three categories, where we can get most bang for our buck, most impact in terms of quality of life in the neighborhood, but also in terms of city resource allocation for those types of issues?
You're quite correct, Councillor. As we've said previously, a lot of it has to do with the density of the areas of those two wards. In addition to that, there's probably a higher ratio of tenants in the two wards than there are in other locations. Property standards itself tends to be a tool that is needed by tenants when the landlord is not maintaining the property, particularly inside. So the more tenants you have in a ward, the higher that number of complaints. Property maintenance has to do with the external area. And when as we promised previously, we have rolled out a proactive program where one officer a day will be patrolling the two wards to stay on top of those issues. Noise, again, it's the very close quarters of the wards, and quite frankly, the closer you are to a secondary, an institution for secondary education, probably the more issues you're going to have surrounding noise, interfering with the residents that generally live in the area. So we're not surprised by the numbers. You will notice probably on the charts that the complaints about dogs, for instance, are much lower in those wards than they would be in more suburban wards where there's more dog ownership. The dogs are out more. So it depends on the demographics in a ward, what kind of buildings are there, whether they're renters or homeowners, and the call volumes vary.
And I can appreciate the management role that you've had in terms of making sure the officers are aware of the changes to the bylaws and what we're trying to, how we're trying to maintain the quality of life in those neighborhoods. So please share that with your team around seeing the good work of the officers and the management team. I'm going to make two comments that aren't specific to bylaw, but actually, in my view, apply. I'd like the organization at some point to recognize that solid waste inspectors should be in bylaw services to fully make the enforcement piece in one department. And I would also like to see Service Ottawa. There's been a lot of progress. There's been a lot of changes that have been very positive, but there's still gaps, and the gaps are late in the evening when the service closes down. And there's also recently we've seen service requests come through Twitter. So we also have to recognize that those are upcoming challenges that bylaw services, but other sectors of our city operations will need to respond. But that said, wonderful report. We want to thank you for all the collaborative work that the department and especially yourselves have been committing to the improvement of our neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shirelli.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things. First, flowing from Councillor Tierney's question, our charges overall may not be the highest in the province, but our calls to the bylaw enforcement certainly are among the highest. And if they've dropped, what is the explanation for that?
Are you referring to the OMBI stats that you said that were recently released?
No, to the report 3 years ago, where we were the highest in the province, and we talked about various reasons for that, and it was all theory. And our calls to bylaw enforcement today, which are still much higher than our charges. I'm wondering what you're doing to get people to look for voluntary solutions to avoid the charges.
It's very dependent on what the issue is. So, quite honestly, in terms of parking, there's very little attempt to encourage compliance unless the owner of the vehicle is right on site. So it's very much more proactive.
No, I'm talking about the non-parking.
Non-parking. So, for instance, on noise, there are certain wards in the city where the decision has been made that the issuance of charges will be proactive, and we will be laying charges because it has been shown to be the most effective way to deal with the problem. In other situations, we would speak to the people, to the homeowner or whoever is making excessive noise, and have that discussion, and often that's sufficient for them to become aware of it and not have a repeat. So we call that a warning. It's all documented. If you take an issue like dog barking, the first response we have when we receive the first complaint about dog barking is to send a letter to the person. Say, we've had a complaint about this. Here are some suggestions on how you may reduce your dog barking. If we don't get any other complaint, then we don't have to go out and spend money, valuable resources to go out and deal with the issue. However, if we receive a second complaint, then we go out and actually visit with the person, have a discussion, give them an official warning, and if we receive a third complaint, at that point we lay charges. So each category that we deal with, each individual situation we deal with is different and unique. So there's no set way that we do it particularly. However, as I said, we prefer to bring about voluntary compliance for many different reasons. First and foremost, we're not here to be punitive against the residents of the City of Ottawa. But secondly, as soon as you issue a charge, you're entering into a court process that is expensive, both for the recipient of the ticket and for the city itself. So if we can resolve the problem without having to go through that process, we always prefer to do it that way.
You recommend that council look at some sort of education program to get people to do that before they make the call to you, because making the call to you is also expensive.
Yes, there's for instance, in a property standards situation where we have a tenant, the officer always asks the tenant, have you spoken to your landlord or property manager about this problem? And depending on, oftentimes the person will say, no, I'm not comfortable doing that, or no, I haven't yet, so we'll encourage them to do that. So yes, we ask people, have you spoken to your neighbor? In some situations, they're not comfortable doing that. Or in other situations, they're not absolutely sure where the barking dog is. Or who owns that barking dog. So yes, we encourage people to speak to their neighbor, but we live in a different society now than we did 50 years ago, and sometimes people just aren't comfortable doing that.
Yeah, and I think Ottawa is more like that than some other cities, because I know we get many of these calls. We always try to impress upon the caller that if they think it's uncomfortable speaking to their neighbor, they're going to find it far more uncomfortable when the neighbor gets a ticket instead. And that's usually the case, because neighbors figure out who the complainant is. So
I think the other thing to consider when we're comparing ourselves with other municipalities is that, to a certain extent, we're a victim of our success. You know, blowing our own horn, we do a fairly good job of going out and enforcing our bylaws in the community. In some municipalities, they're very under-resourced. They only work day shifts. There's no officers on at night, and sometimes not on weekends. And the general public in some municipalities gets to the point where the word goes out that there's no point in calling bylaw in those municipalities because nobody is going to respond to the call. So, you know, there's many different reasons that our call volumes may be higher than other communities. Also, we, you know, demographically, it shows that, you know, we've got a higher educated population here than some other municipalities, and people that are with higher education become aware of what their rights are, what services are available for them in the community. So there's many reasons why. I don't have a study on it, but our sense is that there's many reasons that we receive a lot of calls.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor El-Shandiri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Anderson, for your report, and also congratulations to be the second lowest enforcement operating costs in the OMBI report. So you're right, we operate under a good success with that area. Now, go back to your slide number 5, and in it says Ottawa Public Health to develop and implement a smoke-free strategy. I think you might know, Councillor Holm and I, we have inquiry with the public health to understand about the smoke-free area, because some concern came from business owner. There's some of the shisha being served, not most of it or all of it is herbal. But if we're talking about smoke-free, so it doesn't matter what we serve, whether herbal or non-herbal, why we still have over 22 establishments in the city of Ottawa publicly and promote the shisha or the hookah smoke? Can you tell me where is that strategy with the public health fit today?
I'm going to defer to legal, but I believe the Municipal Act gives the municipality the authority to regulate tobacco products.
Okay.
That's correct.
That's correct, what? So when you talk about develop and implement smoke-free strategy, we're not talking about tobacco smoke right here. We're talking about any smoke.
This is the wording that came out of public health when they introduced the new regulations, and I understand what you're saying. It is somewhat misleading. However, the strategies that they rolled out previously were related to tobacco smoke only. I do know that Ottawa Public Health is working with the province on the issue of shisha, and you know, we play the role of doing the enforcing once public health has moved forward with regulations in conjunction with the province and what our authority is. But I'll leave that question to be answered by Ottawa Public Health, but I know they're trying to address that issue.
Is anybody here today from public health? Okay, from a bylaw perspective, how many of those places have you visited recently, and tell me what kind of tobacco they serve? So we do have at least 22 establishments. They advertise they serve shisha. Can you tell me how many of those 22 today serve tobacco versus herbal?
In order to determine that, a sample has to be tested. It costs in the thousands of dollars to do the sampling. And I don't have the statistics on that at the present time, but certainly we do go in and look at it. We are trying to work with Ottawa Public Health on the issue of shisha.
Well, we've been saying this, Mr. Chair, for almost 2 years. I think the first inquiry Councillor Holm and I were put forward, and it doesn't seem where any advance in that area. We talk about implementing smoke-free on a beach, on a public-owned property, which is fine, but we still is allowed in license established by the city. So really, we need to act on this item, and I would again ask this committee to work with the public health and tell us when is the last time they visit those establishments, how many times have they tested the product, if it's tobacco or herbal, and we need to find out like what's been done about this.
Well, Councillor, I think staff would be prepared to take that as direction to come back and provide committee with, with an explanation as to what they find in terms of, how they would foresee policing this and the costs associated with it, and then we can have the debate about where those costs should come from, and the labor involved. So if you're comfortable with that, we can direct staff to bring that back before us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. But just for the record, we've been waiting for this for 2 years exactly. The last inquiry, Mr. O'Connor answered it this week, and he copied Councillor Holm and I on it, and that was request for information goes back to August, and the one before that from last year. So I would urge Dr. Israel Levy and Mr. O'Connor to work together and just give us, if it's a herbal and there is, that's fine, so at least we can answer to the rest of the businesses who's asking us those questions, because as a deputy mayor who's in charge of the BIAs, I get questions often from the BIAs, why one business allowed to serve shisha and others not?
Sure.
And that's a really concern to us to play fair with everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. One is, how do the numbers of complaints relate to the increase in population?
They're connected. The more the population grows, the higher the level of complaint.
And is the department keeping their eye on the increase in density? My ward is densifying significantly. So is Councillor Fleury's. So people are living closer together in much more confined spaces. How does that relate to the number of calls?
That has an impact as well. And in the denser wards, we have, for instance, we have zero tolerance in terms of noise because of the density and the closeness of the buildings. We have a proactive inspection for yard maintenance now. So we are aware of that. We've also made changes to our deployment of officers to ensure that we took a look at the call volume generally, and we've seen a significant increase in the calls coming in, say, after 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So that's one of the reasons that we rejigged our shifts so that we now have more officers on at night. And for the most part, those officers are working in the downtown wards. So it's unlikely to get a call for a dog at large at midnight, but it's quite likely to get 5 calls for noise in a downtown ward.
Right, and in my opinion, we don't solve the problem on call number 1. We don't go and issue a ticket on call number 1, we wait till call number 5, so of course we get more calls, because the neighborhood is getting more and more upset, and more people are calling in, and our call volume goes up. So is there a technique and a strategy to try and deal with this at the beginning of the session, rather than 2 days later?
Yes, and certainly it depends on, as I said previously, it depends on the nature of the call. So for noise, we're issuing charges on the first response in the urban wards. And in terms of waste, in terms of property maintenance, we issue notices of violation to the owners to have the property cleaned up in a short period of time.
Okay. So you can tell me that every time somebody calls in for a noisy party, we will issue a ticket.
That is what the direction is in 3 of the wards in the city, including your ward.
Mm-hmm. Just like Councillor Fleury, I've been asking that the waste inspectors be moved over to join bylaw Mr. Kanalakis, and whereas Ms. Jones, I've been asking her for about 6 years to get those waste inspectors over into some controlled category like the bylaw group. Is that ever going to happen?
Mr. Chair, we've actually we were considering doing that. I know that's been something that the councillor has been pushing for. We've had discussions and direction and tweaking of the waste management inspectors through Dixon Weir's department, ESD. I wasn't planning to make that move right now because things seem to be, and I'm going to be corrected in a moment, but things seem to be working much better in terms of what those roles are and working with bylaw. They've been working together now in terms of enforcement, in terms of dealing with those types of issues. So we've looked at in terms of what the possibility is of doing that. I made the decision that I wasn't going to make that move right now because I'm seeing some improvements, but it's still an open discussion, quite frankly.
So who is doing the assessment, apart from the communities?
What we have currently working is the solid waste inspectors respond to garbage issues Monday to Friday, daytime. The bylaw officers are there to respond, particularly on the weekends, because there was a hole in service there because the solid waste don't work on the weekends. The solid waste inspectors, in addition to responding to calls about garbage being out too early, too late, also are responsible for managing the contracts for the various companies that pick up the garbage. So unfortunately, it's not a black and white. They do more than just respond out to calls from the citizens about the garbage at the curb. And so there has been some challenges there with that. On the weekends, of course, there isn't garbage pickup, so it's very clear for the bylaw officers just to be dealing with the garbage at the curb and not have those other responsibilities involving the contracts for the pickup companies.
So what are the numbers of tickets issued by waste inspectors, say, over the last few months?
I don't have those off the top of my head, no. So
do you have them, period?
I can get those for you, yes.
Who has them?
Solid waste, no doubt, would have them. But we can certainly get those and send those to you.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, you're just back in time for my annual request over the last 7 years or so to get the waste inspectors moved over to the bylaw organization. And so I've been hearing the comments as to why we haven't done that, because we think it's all doing so well now.
In fairness, Ms. Jones, she just walked in. It's not that we're thinking that it's so well. It's effectively the contracts that are out there, our own internal contract, and then the vendors that won the RFP. There's an element of their job that is about keeping tabs on their performance against that contract. So it goes beyond. So to disentangle it isn't as clear cut as I thought initially when you first raised it and the department moved over to me a year and a half ago when I first was tagged with this issue. It wasn't as clear cut to disentangle and just move over a few waste inspectors over to bylaw and say, problem solved, because I still had a hole in terms of dealing with service level standards. Are they getting to all the streets? Are they picking up where they're supposed to? Are they meeting their obligations under the contract? All that gets fed into the contract management. So they're doing multiple purposes. So we've been working, what I asked them to do, and Linda just explained, I asked them to be working much closer together with bylaw so that we have much more of an integrated approach in terms of how we do that enforcement, how we do that management. The tickets are up, from what I recall, but they're not up significantly.
Mm-hmm. There's about 30 that have been issued.
Since when?
In I believe, the last 6 months.
Wow. So who goes into the backyards of the restaurants to look in those bins, check that the tops are down, that they're not overflowing all over the ground, that they're not smelling to high heaven? Who does that?
That's probably us. For in most cases, it's the City of Ottawa. So we did a proactive in an area in your ward in the spring, and actually issued, as I recall, hundreds of notices of violation. That's why we have somebody doing your ward and Councillor Fleury's ward proactively. We need to stay on top of it on a daily, weekly basis. Otherwise, it starts to become very problematic. So we've committed to that. We're doing that. In terms of the storage of the garbage on the property, that's bylaw services. Solid waste deals with it at the curb, too early, too late.
Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty sad thing to say, that we gave out hundreds of tickets, which meant we've been doing nothing for quite a long time, if that was the case. On to the shisha matter. We were doing some work on shisha for a short time, but we have to work with the federal inspectors because they're the ones who have the ability to take samples. And then the federal labs have been doing the work for us. How long that can continue seems to be somewhat problematic. And the province tells us what we have to enforce through an inspection. We have to do so many restaurants, so the high end and down through, and we have to meet specific demands of the province. And shisha isn't on the drawing board yet of the province. So, we're doing what we are mandated to do and have to report to the province. So shisha has been falling through the cracks for several reasons. So, yes, public health is working with the province to try and get some better control of that, some better definitions, some better access, and some better ability. When we did take samples, the majority were tobacco. So although they say they're herbal, the majority of the samples had tobacco in them. So that's a problem, and many, many young kids are going because it's said to be herbal, and their parents don't mind because it's supposed to be herbal, but in fact we've found that much of it is not herbal. So that's something that we certainly need to be working with public health on. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Vice Chair Kadri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And on my behalf, it's an excellent report on the committee's behalf. Thank you for doing the report, not only to you, Ms. Anderson, but to the team. It's the first of annual, I'm assuming, and I think it's information that needs to be there on the table in order for us to understand your challenges as well as what the communities are facing on, as we grow and as we change the face of our community. In terms of in my area, just like in the downtown area, the intensity growth, it creates some of those issues also. Question coming back to your slide 10, you've got numbers given to us on animal calls, on noise calls. I was wondering, is there any way possible to break those calls down? Like in noise, for example, you've got 10,000 in 2001, roughly about 15,000 in 2012. Is there any way of breaking down what those calls comprise of?
Actually, no, not now. Our database doesn't allow us to filter that down. We would have to open up every request for service and see the officer's notes to figure out what it was regarding. So we don't have subcategories for noise in particular. To a certain extent, we do with animals in terms of dog bites and dog barking and that kind of thing. But in terms of noise, no, it's just noise.
Just noise. And that would include any, whether it's music noise or whether it's noise from a construction site, those kind of calls would all be included in that.
Correct.
My question relates to item number 5 coming back, I guess, because here in this report, we're taking the noise issue or noise complaint issue back to you in terms of bylaw rather than, going through council. At least that's what the recommendation of the report is. I just want to clarify that, these noise complaints are not just construction-related noises. They include all of the other things that happen in the community from day to day and hour to hour.
Absolutely. Certainly music is probably just anecdotally, partying music is probably the highest call volume. Construction noise, it's not that regular.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, are there any other questions for Chief Anderson? No? So with that then, may we receive this Bylaw and Regulatory Services Annual Report? Received. Thank you very much. And now for return engagement. Chief, you're up again to talk about noise bylaw exemptions, specifically as it relates to construction. And I think you have a small presentation on that as well.
Thank you. Having to present 2 reports at one meeting is is a bit stressful, but let's go on. So the City of Ottawa noise bylaw regulates construction noise and requires that construction vehicles and equipment not be operated between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Monday to Saturday, and 10 p.m. and 9 a.m. on Sundays and statutory or holidays, public holidays. The current noise bylaw delegates to the Chief of Bylaw and Regulatory Services the authority to grant exemptions from the construction-related regulations for no more than 11 calendar days per year, with the following conditions: that the noise created by the activity does not exceed 90 decibels from the point of reception, that the activity will not continue more than 8 hours in any one day, and that the affected ward councillor or councillors concurs with the granting of the exemption. There is an application form which must be completed for these 11-day exemptions. There has been an increase in the number of requests for noise exemptions related to construction for major municipal construction projects. Some of these requests for exemption are well beyond the limits of the delegated authority that staff holds. Given the need of these significant municipal construction projects to be completed on time and on budget, and being mindful of the ongoing concerns of the public about increased traffic congestion, the number of bylaw amendments and motions to provide for longer-term exemptions have been brought forward to Council since 2012 on a case-by-case basis. For example, in the case of road-related construction, particularly in the downtown area and on Highway 417, the ability to work outside of daytime hours may be necessary to alleviate some of that traffic congestion that is occurring. It is anticipated that there will be further requests for noise bylaw exemptions related to construction activities as the city continues to experience the current growth and the building of our light rail system. As well, it has more recently come to light that there may be some third-party construction projects that significantly impact on municipal services, such as roadway and transit traffic. And it's recommended that these should also be eligible for an exemption. And to give you the specific example that we've become aware of, there's a redevelopment proposed starting next spring of the Rideau Centre, which will have significant impact on the Mackenzie-King Bridge, which is, of course, a major bus route. It is proposed that the noise bylaw be amended to authorize the Chief of Bylaw and Regulatory Services to provide for noise exemptions for municipal projects and third-party construction projects which have a significant impact on municipal services under certain conditions, including but not limited to requiring that the ward councillor or councillors, if it impacts more than one, be notified, requiring some form of public notification, and setting a 90 decibel threshold where appropriate. These exemptions will be subject to review and termination jointly by the Chief of Regulatory Services and the Deputy City Manager of Planning and Infrastructure, based on complaints received and on compliance by the contractor with the project requirements, the terms of the contract, the noise bylaw, and any other relevant consideration pertaining to public interest. An automatic review of a granted exemption will take place 90 days into the project, and any proposed terminations will be preceded by notification to the ward councillor or councillors. These noise exemptions would be granted for one or several of the requirements of the noise bylaw, including the existing noise requirements related to construction equipment, the use of power tools, loading and unloading of vehicles, the use of transport trucks, or any other requirements of the bylaw as may be required for the particular project for which the exemption is sought. The suggested public notification for the aforementioned exemptions would be determined in consultation with the affected ward councillor and could include, as applicable and appropriate, posting notification on the city's website, a public service announcement, notice to the community associations, hand-delivered notices in adjoining or abutting neighborhoods, and the use of social media or other communication methods. There would be an application process for the proposed noise exemption in order to ensure that each exemption is documented. Applications would be required at least 30 days prior to the commencement of the activity. The exemption would have a limited term with a fixed end date to be determined on a project-by-project basis, subject to the same conditions outlined previously. It is recommended that the Chief Bylaw and Regulatory Services be authorized to include the 90 decibel threshold as a condition of the noise exemption where it is appropriate. This 90 decibel threshold is based on the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and it is the same that is currently identified in the 11-day exemptions. Exemptions that have already been approved by Council for Lansdowne Park and for the tunnel of the Confederation Line would remain in effect and remain separate from this proposed amendment. The staff of Bylaw and Regulatory Services reviewed the recommended bylaw amendments in conjunction with the Rail Implementation Office and Infrastructure Services and with Legal Services. Notification of the expected consideration of the proposed bylaw amendments to be today at Community and Protective Services Committee was posted on the city's website. The amendments, if approved, require public notification for each project for which an exemption is sought. And once again, we're open for questions.
Thank you very much, Chief, and certainly I think we all understand with the unprecedented amount of growth and renewal that Council has undertaken, there certainly seems to be a need or a rationale behind having a more kind of fluid process for noise exemptions. I have one question, then I'll turn it over to my colleagues for questions, and then I know we have one speaker on this issue. Currently, the process is that ward councillors are required to sign off or give approval, and you're proposing that you amend that process so that the ward councillor be notified. And I know that it's your intent that the ward councillor be involved in the process, but can you speak a little bit to why it is you're seeking to change that, and whether there's a rationale behind simply not saying, well, you also require the ward councillor to sign off as you currently do?
The 11-day exemptions very frequently are related to private projects, the construction of large towers, condominiums, those kinds of issues, and have an impact on a very specific neighborhood, in which case the previous 11-day requires that the ward councillor sign off on it. In this case, some of the projects are far-reaching, have large city impacts. So a project that may occur in an East End ward may have an impact somehow on the flow of traffic into the downtown center. So we felt it more appropriate in this instance to involve and consult with the councillor, but not require the sign-off of the particular ward councillor where that project is being undertaken.
So, for clarity's sake, though, if you want to move to this scenario, are you going to maintain two separate tracks of process? So, for example, if someone wants to have a rock concert in my ward, if this is approved, Councillor Shirley will approve it. Would that still flow through a process where it will require my sign-off on it? Or would that simply now fall into this situation where it's notification?
This proposed amendment is only for large municipal construction projects. So the other issues around rock concerts, smaller projects would stay in the 11-day, and the councillor would have to give sign-off. These are intended for these larger projects. An example is the on-ramp at 174. I live close to it. I was aware of the fact that it was being paved last night. It makes sense. The traffic going on there is horrendous during the daytime hours. So it's those larger projects related to municipal work that's being done, not any other work, except in the case of any project where the city has said you can't impact that particular road during the daytime hours. So our staff, the city staff, has been involved with that project and has put limitations on that project.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. So first question goes to Councillor Tierney and then Councillor Shirelli. Oh, Councillor Shirelli, all right, they're bidding for it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, this kind of change is analogous to the changes we made with site plan approval a number of years ago, where councillors are consulted on the site plan. Initially, we thought it would be when the site plan was submitted, but we've had cases where that's dwindled down to 2 or 3 days before the thing was actually going to be approved. So as soon as you remove the requirement for consent by the councillor, the notification around this place has just dwindled to the point where it's in just in time to get approval, and where there really is no opportunity for input anymore, because you can't make it that late. How many cases have you had where the councillor's refusal to consent has resulted in any delay to municipal construction?
We haven't any. The larger projects have gone to council for amendments specifically. So the other projects are smaller in nature, and for the most part haven't come forward asking for amendments. Councillor, sorry, did you interrupt? We don't anticipate the number for this to be very large. I give you my commitment here today that I would anticipate that councillors would be aware of this request as soon as we receive the application, because it will be done in conjunction with our own city staff. It won't be done simply by a third party. If there's a third party making the request, we will tie it back to a city staff, and we will tie it into the councillor's office to make them aware of it.
But I remember 3 or 4 years ago, a major IKEA was planning on an 11-month period of driving piles into the ground, 11 months of making noise. And I just said that's not good enough. And although it was impossible to do it any other way, when the application came in, within a week they had it down to 3 months, and we agreed to that. So the neighborhood would not accept that it's going to be 11 months of a toothache when it would eventually come out that it's possible to do it in shorter time. And I think residents will hold us just as accountable for approving this, if that's the outcome, as they would for us personally approving an individual application. So how are we going to safeguard against that kind of thing, where construction people are just not pushed to deliver the best timing?
So, using your example of IKEA, the difference that we believe in this situation is that these projects have major impact on major arterial roads or bus lanes throughout the city of Ottawa. As I said, rather than IKEA coming to us asking for these exemptions, if IKEA comes to us, we'll be saying, who's the city person that you're working with on that? Who's your project officer? We will be dealing directly with the city project person on this. Okay, in meeting with light rail and infrastructure services, we learned that sometimes the contractors working for the city aren't as compliant as they should be, which is why we put in that the requirement that we can cancel this at any time. If we set guidelines for how this is to be done, and the contractor doesn't abide by those, we have the ability to pull back the exemption. And they were very clear, city staff was very clear that they wanted that mechanism in there. So it's not a carte blanche. It will be hopefully well explained to the ward councillor that it's going to affect, and we will be monitoring it on an ongoing basis and keeping track of the complaints that we're getting. To be perfectly honest, this summer, given all the construction that's underway, we're getting very few complaints. It's our sense that the residents of the City of Ottawa are aware that this is going on and that it's a necessary evil to work our way through it. What I'm hearing through the media is far more complaints about the congestion of the traffic. Now, complaints could be going to other sources, but in bylaw services, we're not receiving a lot of complaints.
Yeah, that's because these ones are being done well. The issue of noise in the neighborhood is probably one of the most aggravating issues to residents, because the previous speaker, who was you, pointed out that is probably the single largest volume of calls that we get about encroachment into the neighborhood. So when we dealt with this with with site plan, council arrived at the solution that the councillor could either concur or it gets bumped to the next committee meeting. And would you have a problem with that? Because presumably you're going to be giving us notice further ahead than just the next committee meeting.
It's not our intent to bring this before committee every time there's a request.
No, that's not what I mean.
Sorry.
I mean, if the councillor concurs, it just proceeds. If the councillor doesn't concur, it goes to the next committee meeting, and you let council decide.
Currently, we're not asking for the councillor's concurrence, so we'd have to change that.
But I'm asking what your problem would be with a provision that does that. Because, if there was a councillor who was being obstructionist to a citywide project, they wouldn't have the power to stop it. It would just go to the next committee and they'd be overruled. That's the principle we operate on site plan, and it's worked fairly well, except we don't get notified on time all the time. But assuming we're going to be notified, it allows the neighborhood input. It allows the councillor to have some meaningful consultation in it, and ultimately the decision would rest with council if nothing can be resolved.
So, if there's not agreement with that, it would rise to council. If the councillor didn't agree, it would rise to council. I think what we're hoping to do with this is to remove the burden from a particular ward councillor on a project that has citywide impact. So that's where our intention was. If it, by way of direction, you want us to change that,
I will move an amendment to make it clearer. But if Councillor Holmes has a particular issue and it can't be resolved, then I don't see the problem with it rising to council and all of council evaluating whether that's legitimate enough to slow down or make changes to the project.
And Councillor, perhaps I can add some information. As per our current policy, we've had situations where noise exemptions have been sought, hasn't received the support of the community nor the council, and what we've advised individuals seeking it is then if they can get another member of council to bring a motion forward, then it would rise. And we would not be bringing that forward on our own. It would only rise if there was another councillor who wanted to support that.
All right, but when we deal with site plan, we have a mechanism that has worked fairly well where if the councillor does not concur with the site plan, then it rises to committee right away. So committee makes a decision as to whether the councillor was right or staff or the applicant were right. And we haven't had anybody lose a lot of time over that. And since we've tested the mechanism, do you think it could work here?
if that's the will of committee, and we're open to, as I said before, these are municipal projects. I think by having the ward council that's most affected as part of the process of being advised and setting up the notification to the public, our intent is to remove some pressure from a council in a particular area, as I said, that for a project that is more far-reaching than just that ward in which it's occurring.
And perhaps I can add to that too. I think the process would be cumbersome. When we're dealing with noise, it's nuisance-related issues, and I'm wondering if the councillor does not want that activity taking place in the ward, different to a site plan, which is a land use issue, versus a temporary situation that we're dealing with. I'm not sure if committee wants to see these coming forward. My recommendation would be not to have it rise, only if a member of council wanted to do that on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, so if we do nothing, if we do not approve this,
they don't get the exemption.
that's right.
Right.
Or no, the council approves or doesn't approve, and they don't get the exemption. So if you think things have been horrendous to this point, then you would have to do this. But if you think things have been pretty good to this point, then you don't have to do this. So I'm talking about doing something that's halfway between. Because, like, nobody wants, who's got Bronson Avenue? Okay, and nobody wants Councillor Holmes stopping the sign going over the Queensway, something like that, because we want the sign. So presumably if there was a noise issue there, it would be discussed. She would approve it. If she didn't approve it, it would go to committee and we just approve it, or she would convince us not to.
Or depending on what the situation is, another councillor brings it forward because they think it should happen, rather than automatically coming forward. I just didn't know if you wanted to tie that up on an agenda every time, when it may not need to go.
I don't see that it would happen every time. These are municipal projects that presumably are well enough planned that this is all going to occur weeks before. And if we're headed to an agenda with a silly issue, I'm sure the committee chair will intervene and talk some sense into us.
It's a decision of committee.
All right, I'm going to move it.
Okay, Vice Chair Caudry. All right, Councillor Tierney.
Helping you out there, Mr. Chair, with the order. First of all, the rock concerts, little apples and oranges, I don't feel it really relates. The on-ramps, completely understand. Highways, that's not really near residential areas. My issue, and I'm living it today, is the Orleans water main. And clearly, this new bylaw, or a modification of the bylaw, would apply to that because it's a citywide project. It's essentially tearing up all of Montreal Road between Ogilvie and the highway to lay down a water main right beside condominiums. And we've already granted exemptions for overnight work, and my constituents are not happy. With this new bylaw, I'd have no power to even stop it. And this is a concern, and it's no disrespect to staff. I think they do a great job. The problem is I think construction companies are a little more afraid of us than they're afraid of you, and that's part of my fears. If we say, go ahead, staff, you take control of the whole thing, and you can't pressure them or force them to speed up their process. There's no control there at all. And I live in my community, and I know what's happening firsthand. So that's just one example that I have a major concern about. The other is, would it apply to resurfacing projects like, for example, all of Ogilvie Road? We're going to resurface that after the water main is down. I guess that's a citywide project because it's a main artery. Would this new bylaw also apply to that?
These projects would be assessed on a case-by-case basis. So, if I take resurfacing Ogilvie Road, if it, my quick answer to that would be probably not. The water main activity that's going on Montreal Road, which is one of the routes I used to take, but find it too hard to take now. Yes, I understand. I guess the issue is with a certain amount of latitude to get the work done faster, the project will be completed faster. However, we do have the ability, should the contractor not abide by what we establish as the parameters of that particular project, we can pull back that amendment. So we're holding their feet to the fire in that each project will be different. You know, here's what we're going to allow you to do. You know, it's not carte blanche. It's not like, sure, yeah, 7 days a week, here you go. Each project will be looked at. How can it work? How can it best manage with the least possible impact on their residents?
And I do really appreciate that. It's just the problems I have is, I've seen this a couple of times now, where I'll get an emergency email notification, we need an extension of the overnight noise work, or overnight construction work. Well, that's the wrong thing to do. You know, we should be really putting restrictions on the contractors to get the work done in those time frames. Montreal Road's a very small segment of the OWL and New Orleans water main. The next step after they're finally, if they ever finish it, that one small section, they're going to go right up Ogilvie Road, a main artery, again, right between two major condominium complexes in my ward. I know they're going to come calling for overnight exemptions, and frankly, I wouldn't grant them after the stuff I've seen just in the last 2 months, just in the small strip of Montreal Road. So, you know, I look forward to Councillor Shirelli's motion, because we do have to have a say. I guess my last question is, what if we were to say no as a councillor and say no, this will not happen? Like Rainer Blois and I, for example, were asked to concur on an exemption. What if one of us said no? Under the new versus the existing. Under the existing, you wouldn't go ahead, but the new one, what would happen?
So what we're proposing is that you're advised and that we establish how we're going to advise the community that this work is going to go on, but we're not proposing that you have the ability to approve it or not approve it. So that's the difference. But you know,
and that's, I think that's the whole problem. I actually enjoy doing my job. I like being on the hook to my constituency if I make the wrong decision. That's kind of how it works. I remember 2 years ago even we tried to get $30,000 per ward for traffic calming measures, and it went through transportation and evaporated when it got to council. I wanted that power. I think we do good jobs. We live in the communities and we know what's happening. So in this case, I look forward to Councillor Shirelli's motion, because I think it makes more sense. We have to be able to say yes and no. I do appreciate the fact you're trying to take the burden off us, but I think I can live and die by the sword. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And Councillor Shirelli's motion is getting typed up at the moment. Councillor Holmes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Well, it's not the public projects that worry me. You know, if an intersection needs closing because we're doing work in an intersection, whether it's Bronson and Somerset or wherever, I understand that, and I know that our staff working on these projects are doing the best they can. And the LRT is fine as far as I'm concerned. That's an absolutely essential process. They're doing really responsible work on the noise bylaw. So if the neighbors need to be notified, they are. They're warned in advance, so neighbors are usually happier when they know what's happening, they know the duration of time, etc. It's the private projects that I'm worried about. So suddenly there's going to be a large construction project, as there is in my ward. This one is at the corner of Bronson and Queen. We're doing the water main on Queen. It's just about finished. That was done well, usually within the noise bylaw hours, but this particular contractor wants 24 hours for about 6 months. Now, guess what? I'm not agreeing. But he's very aggressive, very determined, and my opinion of your ability to stand up is slim as compared to my ability to stand up to that kind of pressure and sort of nasty behavior. So I'm not happy that we're just going to get notified. And sometimes these notifications come 2 days in advance, like a festival maybe 1 day in advance. Suddenly we need this festival to go, you know, till 2 a.m., and there are condos all around the site. So, you know, I want some ability to be able to talk turkey about the construction site and the neighbors who are around that construction site. And most of the contractors don't care. What do they care that there are, you know, 500 people all living around? So I want some ability to talk to that. So I'll be voting for the request that we have here, that the councillor has a say, and if that is not acceptable, then it rises to, I guess, this committee.
Mr. Chair, if I can just clarify further, I think there might be misunderstanding or perhaps some confusion. The exemptions would only apply, that's being proposed, to city-related projects. Private projects on private property would not apply.
This is on a city street where the traffic is disrupted, a downtown city street.
However, it's private property where they're building the property, correct?
Yes.
Well,
but it's disruptive of the...
It still may be disruptive, but it would be up to council ultimately to allow noise exemptions for privately run projects, not city-related.
Run that past me again.
So the LRT, perfect example. Those exemptions would apply. We have a condominium being built on private property. It would not apply.
Even though there's disruption, major disruption
there may be disruptions on traffic, which we would have to manage around it, but there is not an automatic exemption or even just waiting for the councillor to be notified. Any exemptions with respect to that part of the noise bylaw would have to rise to council. So it would continue to apply. So I just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
So Vice Chair Cadre has a suggestion, I think, with relation to Councillor Chiarelli's motion, and then we'll get to Councillor Fleury. But just want to touch on your last point, Ms. Jones, and Councillor Chiarelli had raised the issue of IKEA. So IKEA was a private project on private property. So the old rules, the rules that Councillor Chiarelli used at the time to kind of force the developer into a more neighborhood-friendly process, those would continue to apply, correct?
That's correct.
So the only projects this applies to are ones in which the City of Ottawa is the not just the project manager, but we're the benefactor of the result of the project. So our municipal construction projects.
Mr. Chair, if I may, what's being proposed is, yes, that major city projects be part of this this proposed amendment, but third-party projects also be included where, no matter where they're occurring, they too have a significant impact either on city roadways, city services, city property, or other types of effects that will have an effect on the city. So that is in the report. Yeah, so we're looking at significant third-party projects as well, out of fairness to them. That's what's being proposed.
So I think that's where I appreciate that. I think that's where we're falling off the table here, because everybody's wondering, what's the definition of significant? Right? Who makes that call?
So we only have one example to date, only one, and that's the reconstruction of the Rideau Centre. City staff have contacted us with a concern about the construction phase that's closest to the Mackenzie King Bridge, that it will interfere significantly with the transit route if it's allowed to proceed during the daytime hours. So the proponent, the private company hasn't necessarily, well, they have subsequently been in touch with us, but it actually was city staff that contacted us and said, we have a problem here, because if they do the work on that particular side of the building during the daytime, it's going to interfere with the transit route, and we can't have that happening. So they're basically between a rock and a hard place on that project. They can't do it during the daytime, and the bylaw doesn't allow them to do it at night. That's one, and that's the only one we're aware of to date. And it's not coming from the private company, but rather from our own city staff saying, we got a problem, can we somehow fix it?
Okay, so I'm going to go to Vice Chair Cadre. He had a comment on Councillor Chiarelli's motion. Then we're going to get to Councillor Fleury. He's been waiting patiently. Then Councillor Al-Shantiri. He hasn't spoken yet. Okay, so Councillor Cadre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to ask Councillor Chiarelli, as a friendly amendment to his motion, that what would happen if we put this under a delegated authority, as we do with some planning applications? give staff that delegated authority, and if the councillor and the staff member cannot agree, then it comes back to committee. We lift the delegated authority and bring it back to committee of council.
It was my understanding that is what Councillor Shirelli was proposing. Is that correct? So if, so that there will be a process where the ward councillor or councillors be looped in right from the application receipt, that they be asked to concur with the exemption.
The councillor most affected?
That's up to you, Mr. Chair, but as you know, some of these projects may affect more than one ward. So we would propose that if councillors are to receive an approval process as part of this, that all affected councillors should probably be looped in.
But my suggestion is to include the word delegated authority. That way it's clearly understood both by staff and the political people.
That'll be a friendly amendment then.
Coming forward.
Friendly
Okay.
amendment, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Fleury.
Yes, I've been very, very patient. My comments are around this element. So LRT, check. The work that Mr. Manconi has done with Lansdowne in terms of public consultation with the neighbors, check. There's no issues there, and I think you're getting from the colleagues here that there's no issues. We want those projects to be delivered on time, on budget, and full steam ahead. I'm worried, and I'm going to use an example where some contractor would bid on a project knowing that they get extension, only put one crew out, extend the length of the noise, instead of saying, hey, we can't do that work with the crews that are needed. And I don't know how this process differentiates that. So with big city projects that we have council buy-in, yes, 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 but then when we get into the specific road renewal or noise exemptions, I'm weary of these changes.
Okay, we thought to ask our counterparts who know more about this to go today.
Councillor, I think the intent is, first of all, when we put our contracts together, we put the restrictions on when and you can and cannot work and when the completion date has to be established. And before we get to that point, we work with the ward councillors to look at some of the impacts of delivering that project. Obviously, we have to take into account working in a residential area versus working in a greenfields area that's not impacting the residents. So a contractor can't come in arbitrarily and make determinations on his own without our endorsement.
So what you're describing to me is that nothing would change from that perspective from what's proposed or what is done currently?
No, not really at all. This is really, I guess, to make it an easier process when it's required to do works on a more of a one-off. This isn't about working 24/7 because of this change. This is about when it's required, a special circumstance when we need to work through the evening, that we can work closely with bylaw to make that happen.
I'm comfortable with the motion in some respects because we haven't looked at the other side of the medal where the work is needed 24/7 for emergency purposes or for budget purposes, and the ward councillor cannot politically say that they're in favor of it. So the benefit of bringing this back to council to get an objective view into that actually has budget impacts in my view at some level. So, I don't know where this stems from. I don't know if it's an LRT specific thing or if it's a project specific. What we can say is that we're in favor of all the work that's needed for the LRT. The Rideau Center will definitely, require a working group to look at those aspects. But I don't know that there's that many other properties for which we're comfortable at this point to give delegated authority to.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Shirelli, did you have something you wanted to add to your
Quasi wrap-up, or what is it? Okay.
Yeah, so the motion's been typed up. It's on your screens. Oh, they're just changing it to include Councillor Caudry's amendment. I will remind you that we do have one speaker on the issue, so we'll allow Councillor Shirelli to... okay. All right, so while that's getting up on the screen, Councillor Tierney.
So I guess I have a question in regards to For example, I got this noise exemption, urgent noise exemption request sent to Rena Blois and I on the 11th in the evening for an exemption for the 14th and 15th for overnight work. What determines things are urgent? Like, is there no planning in this? Like, we have to have time to be able to inform our communities, and I think that's a big part of it, too, is that's why we have these checks and balances. I mean, clearly we can't put out print media in that time, but we do have relatively good Twitter and Facebook accounts, and we can put out some kind of a translated message to our community by email, at least some kind of warning. And what determines if it's urgent?
Without seeing it, I'm thinking that this is one of the 11-day processes. So whoever the contractor is that's working on this has applied for the 2-day exemption, not within the 60 days that's mandated under that process, and it's coming to you at the last minute.
Yes.
Fully understand.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right now our world is full of those things. We're getting requests from our own staff to, this project's going to take 6 months or 2 years, around well, it's way beyond our ability. Or these 11-day ones that become emergencies at the last minute. I think what we were attempting to do with this, what we're bringing forward today, is to try to put more structure around the city construction projects. And I think the one you're referring to is a city construction project. So at the outset, we could have done an analysis of that entire project, determined what was going to be required, and had a good idea of when there may need to be some nighttime work in order to be able to advise the community. I agree with you. I think the most important thing is advising the community. Most residents can live with the noise if they know what it is and when it's going to stop.
Exactly.
It's that unknown that makes them very upset. So, unfortunately, we're getting more and more of those kinds of requests.
Yeah, and that's a big part of the concern, especially when it's a Friday notification. Looking for a Monday, Tuesday. I represent a bilingual ward. I must get everything translated to get it out to my constituency, and it doesn't give me that ability. It's very difficult. So, again, I look forward to Councillor Shirelli's motion, because I think it will address some of that. Thank you very much.
Okay, before we let Councillor Shirelli wrap up on his motion, Councillor El-Shantiri, you had something you wanted to offer to this?
So I just saw what Councillor Shirelli proposing right here. That recommendation be amended to require consent of the council most affected, and that when the council will hold consent, the matter right through delegate authority to committee for decision. If you recall, this summer, for 6 weeks, this committee didn't have a meeting, Mr. Chair, and that would concern me if something arises from this motion, so that means the job will be on hold till this committee have a meeting and the item raised. So I caution you, before we jump, on a, you want to be informed or you want to sign off on a consent. What this motion does, really, it will delay quite a bit of project during the time when you need to be able to do it, because in the summertime, this committee for 6 weeks consecutively didn't have a meeting. So what would you do in a time like this? So I will not be supporting this, and I would caution my colleague, that's going to delay quite a bit of project for the city if we go with this, because we heard from even our planning staff, sometimes the councillor takes a long time to even sign on a consent of a planning application, and that will create a delay on the process. So I will not be supporting this, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and on the time issue, Ms. Jones, Valerie, on the time issue, can you speak to that? Is the time proposed in the report enough, or if this motion goes into effect, do you need to provide more time for the committee process?
To implement the process that's being suggested by the motion, we may need to have more time. Just looking at the scheduling of meetings, and I assume that in the proposed amendment, the matter just wouldn't rise to committee, it would also rise to council. If that's the case, then we have to add on an extra week. Right now, in the proposed amendment, we are asking applicants to come forward 30 days in advance. I suspect the 30 days may not always be sufficient if we are looking at a procedure to rise to committee and council in the case of objections. We may need to bring it to 60 days. 60 days is what's currently in place for the 11-day exemptions. So 60 days. So requiring the applicant to come forward 60 days in advance would allow ample time to have the application received, vetted by staff, contact the affected councillors, see if there's disagreement, and then work something up for the next committee and then council meeting. I think that you're right, Mr. Chair, 30 days may not be sufficient for this process. I don't know if the chief has any other comments on that.
Okay, well, that's ridiculous. No, it's ridiculous, because look what you have now. Right now, you don't even have that process. Right now, if the councillor says no, it's dead. And you've never had a single project stopped or delayed because of that. So to suggest that this is somehow adding all kinds of more restrictions to you, it's not. It's removing them.
I'm just not sure we're always going to be able to get to a committee meeting and a council meeting.
But what happens today under the current system? It's dead as soon as they say no.
Correct.
So
there's no
unless the
opportunity
council walks it on to council.
It's a delay of 1,000 years right now. We're shortening it to 6 weeks in the
My
extreme.
understanding of your motion is that it does rise to committee in the event of an objection. It doesn't just sit
Right
with the
now,
councillor.
it's dead. Right now, there is no committee to appeal to. Right now, the councillor says no, it's dead. And you've admitted to this point you have never had a project stopped or delayed, municipal project stopped or delayed for that reason.
I don't believe any have come forward with respect to significant construction projects. That being said, if the proposed...
I've been around here a long time. We've done significant construction projects before this year. We have. And I've never seen any member of council, not even Alex Cullen, stop or delay a project over a noise exemption. So we're dealing with fantasy here. The real issue is, are council members and their communities going to be able to have input into whether the noise exemption is granted and into modifications that make it more acceptable?
All right, so Councillor Chiarelli, then, do you want to read out your motion, and we'll get that on the table, and then we'll have the public delegation.
So the recommendations be amended to require consent of the councillor most affected, and that when the councillor withholds the consent, the matter rises through delegated authority to committee for decision.
Okay, so that is before us, as well as the report itself. And now we have one registered delegation, Mr. Kevin O'Donnell. And Mr. O'Donnell, I know you've appeared before committee, so I believe you know the drill. You have 5 minutes from when you begin, and please remember to use the microphone.
And push the button, which is what I usually forget. Thank you, committee, for taking this time. I just have 3 words. It's the or other property definition in the document that is the actual draft bylaw text, as I understand it. Reading through the report takes pains to always attach third-party projects that have significant impact to municipal-sponsored projects. So these are third-party construction at the behest of the city in some way. Unfortunately, the bylaw text, as I understand it, does not make that clear, that precise of a connection. I've heard from staff make those same connections here to you today. I think making those connections is fine. If we have big works in the city, those should proceed. We want to save money by making a little noise, that's fine. My concern is perhaps the IKEA example, where a third-party construction on private property could have significant impact, which I'm also not sure exactly what that means, but that's fine, leave that aside. Significant impact to city something, et cetera, or other property. What is that other property? Is that other private property who is a neighbor? I know it's obviously the intent of staff to proceed with a system that's going to work and make the system easier. My concern is just, when there's a little bit of sunlight shining through a crack, that's how later on, 5-10 years down the line, we have perhaps changeover in staff, which is natural. Maybe they weren't here for this conversation. We have new council who maybe don't see the problem that was raised. And we have noise exemptions that are being allowed for private property that is impacting other private property that actually has no impact to city highways or city services, and et cetera. It would be unfortunate to have those exemptions allowed under delegated authority with no accountability to committee and council. So I'd suggest perhaps just striking those 3 words from the draft bylaw, and that would be addressed. Councillor Shirelli, your draft motion in all likelihood addresses my concern in that the councillor who would be looking at that situation would go, no way, I'm not going to sign off on that, and that'll bubble up. So perhaps if your motion proceeds, my concern is mooted, but I think it, we don't want sloppy, sloppy is too harsh a word maybe, but unfortunate bylaw text to sneak in and then have unintended side effects down the line.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. O'Donnell, and I do agree with you. If Councillor Shirelli's motion moves forward, that probably addresses your concern because it provides that safeguard. Is there any questions to the delegation? No? Thank you very much. Ms. Jones, on Councillor Shirelli's motion, he's requiring it come back to committee for a decision. Councillor, is there any reason why we couldn't have it come straight to council? And Councillor Shirelli, would you be fine with that?
I'm fine with that.
If staff are concerned about the 60-day window, then if we eliminate the committee step, it gets you right into council. Does that work?
It's fine.
On the motion?
On the motion, I'd like to maybe add a friendly amendment related to private property. I think the discussion here has been around municipal projects, and it's confusing to bring the Rideau Center piece in there. I mean, light rail, the discussion has been that we will bring a specific report for Rideau Center. So if that property is specific, it shouldn't be part of this debate in my mind. So I think we should pull the private property aspects of this report. Would you see that as a friendly amendment?
I think staff needs Rideau Center considered as the same issue, don't they?
I think the staff would, the purpose of chaining, and again, I think the challenge for staff here is we're caught in this, what do you mean when you say private property that has a significant impact? And that's the challenge. You created the, you gave us the example of the Rideau Center. That's the only example you can give us. So we're struggling a little bit, I think, to imagine what other private property projects would have a significant city impact. I mean, you're telling us that IKEA doesn't. So that's a massive site. So you're telling us that would be under the old rules, where the councillor already can veto that process. So if you're asking for a little more latitude on city-operated projects, I think Councillor Fleury is having that same challenge with public. Can you come up with one other example, even if it doesn't exist today? Could you dream up an example of where there'd be a private property project that would have a significant impact on the city, such that you'd want to invoke this bylaw?
Perhaps, Chair Taylor, the convention center would have been where they were doing some work there and had to enter onto the roads. That's the other big significant project we could think of that, this exemption might have applied. I'm not sure if there were lots of problems, although we had to do work, and we worked through, of course, our infrastructure group in terms of encroachment permits and how it's going to happen. But for the most part, we can't think of any others where it would have applied.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that the vote be held.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And the chair will take that direction. I think we're done with debate on this anyway. So Councillor Shirelli's motion is before us, and he's read it out. So yeas and nays on Councillor Shirelli's motion.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor El Shantiri? No. Conseiller Fleury?
Malheureusement, oui.
Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Cadre?
Yes.
Chair Taylor?
Yes.
7 yeas, 1 nay.
That's carried. And then on the main report as amended, is it carried? Carried. Thank you very much. So with that, I know we have some members who have to get out to a health event. We only have one other item. That's notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meeting. Councillor Fleury, I know you have one. Read it at speed.
Yes. I'll read the therefore be it resolved. It's related to you might have seen in the media some of the issues related to the Privacy Act for pawnbrokers and secondhand goods. So the therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review the Pawnbrokers Act and advise whether they can recommend that the province be approached to make amendments to it in order to more easily and efficiently put in place a municipal licensing scheme for pawnbrokers, and furthermore that staff consult with the Ottawa Police Services to review best practices in other municipalities in responding to these questions. These are again for stolen goods in pawn shops and possibilities of investigating.
Thank you very much, Councillor. That's a notice of motion. With that, are there any inquiries? Any other business? And we're adjourned. Thank you very much.